podcast where we put you on the map. This is Ron Costa broadcasting live in the Mappable USA studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. And folks, today we're going to talk about the A word. The A word. It's called accountability. Before we do that, let's bring in Vicki Hutchmala from the World Token Market. Vicki, how are you today?
I'm outstanding today, Ron. We got a great topic, something a little bit different, but I think our listeners are going to learn a lot to become better bosses and better people in general. And we have a repeat guest, so I can't wait to talk to him.
Same here. So let's bring him on. Folks, meet Thomas Cox. He's from Eudae. He's a management consultant. And like Vicki said, you've been on the show before. Thomas, thanks for coming back and welcome back.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's really good to be talking to you again.
Yes, excellent.
Talk about accountability, and I want to mention it to Vicki. That's what I wanted to talk about. She was pretty enthused, and that's common because if you bring up accountability in almost any setting, and then you let everyone say accountability and look around, two things happen, right? People either look very guilty and upset, or scared, like they're going to get blamed, or they go, yeah, why aren't those people over there more accountable? And it's kind of a crisis of accountability, frankly. And I tell you, if you want to stand out in the workplace, all you got to do is be more accountable than the rest, and everyone wants to gravitate to you, right? Because you're the reliable one, you're the high performance one.
Exactly.
And so, it's a great virtue, but getting there is not easy. The folks who are best at it seem to be just unconsciously good. And you ask them, what do you do? And they're like, I don't know. You just do it. And then you ask the people who wish they were more accountable, or wish more likely other people were more accountable, say, why can't you get them there? And the answer is, I don't know. But what's funny is when I take the approach I've learned to take, and I used to do it all wrong. I used to be very, finger waggy and judgy and blamey and try to, name, blame, and shame people into higher performance. Doesn't work very well. I finally found that there is an approach that works to raise both your own level of accountability and that of an entire team, but there's some subtleties to it. I mean, I guess if it were obvious and trivial, then we'd all be doing it, all the time with great ease, and you'd get minimum wage workers to do it. But it is subtle, and I'll break it down for you. The first thing to understand about accountability is if you don't have a shared understanding between you and the other person, there's literally no way for accountability to arise. And as George Bernard Shaw said, the great problem with communication is the illusion that it has occurred. People we think we've got agreement. It's like I said yes and he said yes. We must be on the same page. And then you find out later that you thought you'd asked for an outcome. He thought he'd promised best effort. It's like, no, I don't want best effort. I want a result. And that's the first place we diverge. And it's like, well, I did the work. You never told me. Well, you didn't take to tell you. You just had to do it. And so I've documented there's over 30 different points where people can diverge quite unconsciously from each other, and they're left pointing the finger at each other and getting mad, getting blamey, and feeling disappointed and upset. And it's neither one of their fault because they didn't slow it down enough to get a proper agreement in the first place. So that's what my practice does. I taught this once 4 years ago. I did a class on how to bring a team to higher levels of a culture of high accountability. And then I went off and did blockchain for 3 years, and that's when you and I last spoke, was when I was heavy into blockchain. Mm-hmm. And then I came back, and I was restarting the accountability work, and I got back in touch with him. His name's Ben. I said, hey, Ben, I don't know if you remember that class I taught you back in 4 years ago. And he said, oh, my God, I use it every day.
Yeah, no question. Well, but how does that explain things like, if you say to somebody, look, I got a pen here and this pen is blue. Everybody can pretty much agree that the pen is blue because everybody
Absolutely.
sees it. But there's so many times that you might have you have so many times you have a discussion with a colleague or somebody, and both those people will leave that table thinking that they completely understood what was going on, and yet they didn't. So how does that happen? How does that is it a language issue?
I'll tell you exactly how that happens. It has to do with all the things that you and I take for granted is obvious because that's how we've always done it. But if you and I, Bob, haven't done this thing before, then I'm judging you by all the other people I used to work with, and you're judging me by all the other people you used to work with. But what if you and I are different? Then, and if, let's say, one of us is from a Northern European culture, the other from a Southern European culture. I'm going to use some broad stereotypes. Then, for one of us, noon tomorrow is a deadline, and for the other one, noon tomorrow is an aspiration. It's like, well, which is it? It can't be both. I mean, one of us is 11:30, and we're slaving away to make that 12 o'clock deadline, and the other one's like, oh yeah, look, 11:30. I guess, should be thinking about that, shouldn't I?
Yeah, well, is it 11:30 East Coast? 11:30 East Coast or West Coast, right?
Thank you.
You got 3 hour difference.
Yes. Yeah. If you're working internationally, it's all over the map, right?
Yeah.
Vicky,
from what you're saying, it kind of sounds to me like if you really want true accountability, you can't ever have true accountability unless you have a well-defined plan and communication of that plan, regardless of what you may already believe or think or are conditioned to. This is the plan, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to achieve, but these are the steps we're going to take to do that, and everybody has to be active in that communication to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, I'll tell you, how I first learned about this problem is illustrative. I think you'll love this. It was brought in, this would have been 4 or 5 years ago. A guy named Doug, he owned a small business, well, not so small, and it was kind of a job shop. He had very smart people on staff, and they did projects for, rotating list of clients, mostly digital work. So it was a lot of, programming and aesthetic work. You're creating ads for them. You're creating Facebook content and whatever. And so it's very project-oriented, right? High level of communication. They're all professionals. They're all like college educated. They're smart people. And he said half his projects lost money. He says, I don't know what's going on. And I said, me neither. I can't wait to find out. So I went in and just sat with them a couple of days every week, on and on, and said, okay, so what went wrong this week? Because if you asked them what went wrong last week, they don't remember. And if you ask them what's going to go wrong next week, they're very optimistic. Nothing's going to go wrong next week. So you say, what's going on wrong right now? They'll tell you. And I started looking at their email, started looking at their instant messages, started listening to some of their voicemails and some of their phone conversations. And I realized that they were using a lot of assumptions rather than being explicit. Exactly. And when we fast forwarded, I was able to say, look, here's what you need to do with your clients in order to stop creating this dynamic where you need something from the client, they don't give it to you, the project runs late because they weren't responsive, but you don't, for whatever reason, they didn't feel that they could charge the overcharge or the uptick or the late fee or the whatever. And it was routine. Like the clients would refuse to answer questions, or refuse to get back to them with decisions, but still expect the original timeline, the original budget, which is nonsense, just total nonsensical. But how do you break somebody of that? They weren't front-loading these conversations. They weren't onboarding people into a shared language of accountability. So this is what I taught them. I said, look, all accountability has to go through 4 stages. It's always present, whether it's please pass me the salt or please build me the Hoover Dam. Whatever the agreement is, there's an initiation phase where you're asking for the help, and you're going to try and be as clear as you can. And I actually have a checklist of 7 things you should ask yourself before you even start. Then comes phase 2, where you negotiate. Okay, you asked for something, but you want oak, there's no oak. I've got maple, I've got ash. What kind of what I have, what do you want? Or so maybe we part ways, you find somebody else to work with you. Yeah, okay, ash, we'll do maple, sure. Okay, I can't do this, I could do that. I can't do it by Friday, I could do it by next Tuesday. What's that going to do for you? Negotiate. Eventually you come to conclusion. Now the work starts. Now it's phase 3. During phase 3, everything that you didn't clarify in phases 1 and 2 comes up. Like, oh, we ran out of this. Oh, this subcontractor's late. Oh, shoot, I never asked you what color for the trim, blah, blah. And so during initiation and during negotiation, you tell the client, look, there will inevitably be questions. Here's how I will ask you the question. There's a format called the warm ABCs for specifying this. And I'll ask you, I'll put it to you this way. I'll say, A, what do I actually need from you? If I need a decision, I'm going to say requesting decision at the top of the email. If I need a color choice, I'm going to say request choice of color. You will always know what my request is. It'll be clear. Because I'm telling you, Vicki, when I was looking at this client's mess, they would send emails to the client, and I couldn't tell what they wanted. The client couldn't tell. It's like there was sort of a rambly little email about, yeah, we're looking for the logos. I'm really hoping to get the right logo. It's like, are you asking them to pick one? Are you just sharing? Yeah. Like, what's the point of this email?
What am I supposed to do?
Yeah, what are you asking for here? Right? See, anytime you talk to the client, it's ABC, but warmly, right? Because there's no tone of voice in email, so you got to go out of your way to be warm and affectionate and appreciative, because these people are paying your paycheck. A, what do I actually want? Very first thing I'd say. Bottom line up front, here's what I need. B, by when? And it's not just ASAP, okay? Look at the watch, look at the clock. There's no ASAP on a clock. It's I need it by 2 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesday the 2nd. That's clear, And then C, the context and consequence. I need it because this allows us to then get the order into the printer in plenty of time. And if I don't get this from you by 2 p.m. on Tuesday the 2nd, then we miss our window and the entire project will be delayed 7 days. Now, as soon as I shared that part of the training, half the room went, I couldn't say that. I'm like, why can't you? What? It's true. You're not making it up. The printer told you that. It's like you're just passing the word. It feels like I'm threatening them. I'm like, what? Okay, all right. Okay, I get it. Don't try to argue people out of their emotions, right? There's always a kernel of truth.
No, you can't.
What if we just say, hey, look, during onboarding, here's a sample email, and I will always say, A, what do I actually need? B, by when? C, the context and consequence. And the consequence might be something like, if you don't get me the answer in time, there's a $50 overcharge. Are you going to be okay with me telling you that? And all the clients will say, well, of course I want you to tell me this. Please. I got 97 things on my mind. I can't keep track of the context of everything. Of course I want you to tell me the meaning of this choice, the context of the choice, the consequences of missing the deadline. Because, the workers are all up to their eyeballs in it. They know the context and consequence perfectly, but they forget that the client doesn't remember any of it and needs to be reminded. And if you're worried about insulting them or threatening them or coming across with a bad tone, during onboarding, before you even say it, say, hey, here's a template of how I'm going to ask for clarification. We use it every time, purely professional, one adult to another. Please don't take this as any kind of a threat or whatever. I'm just recapping for you, just reminding you of the business rules we all agreed to in the contract and then the fee listing and all that, because I don't want you to be surprised. And if some decision, some deadline involves an overcharge or a late fee or something, I want you to know. I want to surprise you with a bill at the end that's higher than you expected. And they'll say, okay, great. In the unlikely chance that a client doesn't like that, fire them.
Oh, duh.
Don't work with someone who doesn't want to work with you.
Yeah, firing clients is a good thing. It makes your life a lot easier with some of these people. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if someone's super high maintenance and they're difficult to work with and they want you to be accountable, but they won't uphold their half of an accountable relationship, refer them to your worst competitor.
Love it.
Well, and people, it's hard.
Clearly,
to
I can't make you happy. You should call my friend Joe.
And it's hard to get business people to understand that you don't need to work with every person who calls you or walks in the door. You have to be a little bit more selective so that you can actually accomplish what it is that they want you to do or that you are going to provide for them. It's kind of, some things to some people are just no-brainers, but then there's a lot of people who get themselves in a mess just because they haven't defined what's going to happen. It's like setting up a contract. There are certain things that a contract requires in order to be a contract that's enforceable. Yes. And what you're saying is relatively create a contract that's specific and says, when this happens, this will happen. If that happens, this will happen. And anticipate the possibilities so that you can adapt and work through them without creating havoc.
Right. And I'll tell you, the real trick to all of this is the mindset and the opportunity to learn. Because what you definitely want to do is make sure that you tell people, look, we're involved in a high-stakes, high-dollar, tight timeline project here. The odds of occasional miscommunication are high because we're all human, but here's my pledge to you. I will do my best to over-communicate. If there's a problem, I'll tell you right away. If we get our wires crossed, I'll do my best to uncross them. And once we're all done, with any time, when any of our milestones even, and you have to wait to the end of the project, I'd like to do a little retrospective and see where we got our wires crossed and how do we do better next time around. Would you be
exactly so that every new deal or every new contract with every new customer, you're not recreating the wheel. You're just building on what you learned and making it better for what you can do in the future. And by doing that, you enhance the skills and the ability and the confidence of your team and your employees to want to do a better job the next time because you've put them all into the project in equal participation. This is what you're responsible for, and this is what we need to know from you, specifically how you're going to communicate to us about it so that we can end up all in a happy place at the end and have a repeat customer and better employees.
Yeah, and you said something tremendously important just there. One of the things that I noticed when I was doing my early work, trying to better understand, just leadership in general. I spent almost 20 years now trying to understand leadership, and I finally got to a place where I kind of do. The incredible importance for leaders to create a sense of psychological safety for the followers. And psychological safety is just super simple. It's the belief that you won't be embarrassed or ridiculed or punished for admitting to a mistake or asking for help or admitting you don't know or offering a new idea or offering an honest critique of somebody else's idea.
Exactly.
And you'd think that'd be easy, but it's not.
No.
And yet, when you focus on that, interesting things happen. When you focus on creating more of a learning environment where it's not about being perfect, it's about being better, right? We were imperfect this last time around, so that means we just paid tuition on a class. Let's go to class here. Let's please learn. Tuition is mandatory. Learning is optional. Let's learn. So what did we learn? It's like a client's kind of mad at us, probably deservedly so. Either we messed up or they messed up and we didn't stop them. We didn't explain it to them. We didn't hold them accountable. We didn't hold ourselves accountable. Something happened,
Right.
So how do we make it better next time? And when you focus on better next time and you admit your own flaws and you admit your own opportunity to do better, it completely changes the dynamic of the team from one of fear and the need to hide mistakes to one of safety and almost a compulsion to divulge mistakes and learn from them.
Absolutely, because once you eliminate the fear of blame or the fear of punishment because somebody dropped the ball or something didn't happen as you anticipated, but once you eliminate that, you open up the doors and allow people to look and be better and take different possibilities because it could enhance everybody. They're not, like you said, they're not afraid to do something or think something because they're free to do it without fear of any retaliation. And that's key next to communication.
Yes, absolutely. But let's draw an important distinction. When I first get a group of senior executives to start to embrace, not punishing people for asking questions and not, punishing honest honest mistakes. They start to think that they can't hold anybody accountable for anything, including performance. I'm like, no. That's not it at all.
No.
I'm saying you won't be punished or ridiculed for admitting to a mistake or asking for help. But that's not the same thing as not being punished for not doing your job.
That's totally different.
Yes, but you handle it the same way. So you just say, hey, I noticed you didn't do your job. What happened? Oh, well, I fell asleep, because I'm working 2 other jobs, and I really, but dude, I'm sorry you're working 2 other jobs, and I can't have you falling asleep here at your shift. Well, unacceptable. And maybe you get into a problem solving with them, but ultimately you're responsible for upholding standards. Someone shows up to work drunk. That's not a mistake. That's a screw up.
Yeah, right? That's a choice.
That's a choice. And you got to confront that not just for the sake of the company, although you do, but also for the sake of the rest of the workers. Because if you let that slide, then they're thinking, oh, shoot, I can't say anything either, and I got to work next to this chucklehead, and he's putting me in danger.
That's right.
So just because we're saying, don't criticize people for honest mistakes doesn't mean that you don't require them to do their job and say, hey,
well, they still have to be accountable for what they're supposed to do.
Bingo. Yeah. And you could ask them something like, hey, so when I said move these pallets and you said yes, you would move them, what did you intend me to believe? Because I thought you were going to move them, and they're not moved. So we clearly did not understand one another somehow. We're not about letting people off the hook, but we're also not about scaring them, right?
Exactly.
And in the sense of, honest mistakes, honest questions, honest failure. And if someone, we had this one client, they had put a guy in charge of inspections in QA, and he had such bad eyesight, he couldn't read.
Oh, boy.
Okay. His failures were not his fault, but they were still failures. He should never have been given that role, and he needed to be reassigned. And that's just not optional, right? So trying to hold someone accountable to do a task that they literally can't do because they lack capability, it's not. Ultimately, at some point, you have to own the fact that you tried to give work to somebody who couldn't do it, okay? And so maybe you make that mistake once, but don't do it twice.
Right. Well,
right.
If you're ultimately responsible for the success or failure of a project or a contract or whatever it is, that it's to your best advantage to enable your team and your workers to do the very best that they can by not putting roadblocks in their way. You have to understand that just because this person has been here and has seniority doesn't mean that he can do the job that he thinks he can do. Matching the right people to the right job with the right skills is a lot of being a good boss, but once you have those people, then you also have to use them to your best advantage and their best advantage so that not only are you successful at the end, but you can't wait for the next project to do so that you can be even more successful. It's just, things follow things, and it's that, for every action there's a reaction, and that's what you have here. You have the possibility to be completely successful with the project and the whole team, or just mediocre and, it's done, so what can we do now? That's just like, I don't know. If you can make somebody better in their life and in what they're doing, that's what you should do. You shouldn't think twice about it.
I think there's a moral obligation when you're the boss.
Absolutely.
If you're not helping people get better at the job and at life, you're missing an opportunity.
Exactly.
All of us should be getting better.
Not only
all the
for them, but for yourself as well. You make yourself better by making other people better. Helping other people helps you, and it's all symbiotic. If you start with integrity and the right intentions, eventually you get to a place where everybody's good and everything happened right, and anticipation for the next thing is sky high.
Yeah,
then you're a successful boss.
And Thomas, it's easy to be accountable when things work out, right? Saying, hey, I'll take credit for that. It's a success, right? It's easy. But
right.
when things don't work out, accountability is a little bit harder than that. Do you ever have a case where somebody was accountable for a major mistake and they had no idea it was their fault?
Oh, sure, all the time.
Yeah.
Usually
that's getting back to the communication.
On somebody else. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's an ethic or a policy called owning your inputs, and it's one of the things that when you get to the other side of that, when you really embrace it, it's hard, but when you really embrace it, it sets you free. And let's talk about that. If I ask Fred to do something fairly big and complex, and then one of Fred's subcontractors lets him down, his assistant, the caterer, somebody, just totally messes up. And then Fred comes back and says, I'm sorry, Thomas, it's not my fault. The caterer, he messed up. And I'm like, okay, but I put you in charge. I didn't put the caterer in.
Yeah, why didn't you know?
Like,
the caterer wasn't working out.
Who do I put
well.
in charge next time so that the caterer is not an issue? Because I don't want somebody to come back with a neat allocation of blame for failure. I want someone to come back with success, right? And so what I'd like to teach Fred to do is, delegate to a caterer who will keep you in the loop and whom you can replace if necessary. If they're starting to not perform, you've got a backup plan, right? When you own your inputs, if I'm delivering a party on Friday, I'm not waiting till Thursday afternoon to try to line up a caterer.
Exactly.
All right, that way lies madness. I've got it's a caterer with track record. It's I got a backup maybe lined up. I'm checking in on Wednesday to make sure. Okay, so you're ready. Today's Wednesday. You got all the supplies you need. So on Thursday you're making the food that you're delivering to me on Friday, right? And that's the level of transparency you're going to want.
Yeah.
And if they're saying, actually about the supply, okay. As soon as I know by Wednesday there might be an issue, I'm putting up the bat signal. I'm looking for my backup. I might switch from hot food to cold food or something, but I'm going to have my fallback plan and my fallback behind the fallback, because I'm delivering success, and that means I own my inputs, and I'm never going to blame. I'm never going to tell my boss or my client, there was a screw up, but it's not my fault. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, if you give me a task and I take it on, everything's my fault, and I should want it to be my fault, because if it's not my fault, I'm not in control. Now, this is one of the paradoxical things I teach people is you should always want everything to be your fault. They'll blink at you, right? It's like, what? It's like, if it's not your fault, you have no influence, and it's totally beyond your control.
Well, because you have no accountability.
Yeah. And so if I'm going to subcontract, some sub-loop, I'm going to open up an accountability loop to somebody in order to serve you. You open up a loop to me. I say, yes, I will perform this for you, Vicki. Great. I turn around and open up 3 sub-loops to 3 other people to help me do the thing I'm doing for you. I'm monitoring them. I'm tracking them. I've got backups in case they fail. As soon as I know there might be an issue, I'm on the phone to you saying, hey, look, I don't know if anything's going to go sideways or not, but I'm getting some rumblings, just so that you're not in the dark. And I'm not going to bother you unnecessarily, but if it looks like I'm heading for the cliff, I'm not blaming anybody but myself, and I'm going to let you know as soon as I know there's a problem, so you've got time for you to recover, so you can reset expectations. I'm not going to surprise you at the last moment with a failure that I saw coming 2 days earlier. As soon as I know, you know.
You should be a marriage counselor too.
Well, and that's like the basic tenet of strategy, that if you have a project or something that you're going to do or accomplish and you start at square one, you have to anticipate all the potentials. You have to anticipate the ripples that go out. If you do this, this will happen. If that doesn't happen. And if you anticipate what the potential is and have a backup in case that potential becomes a reality, then you always have responsibility, you always have accountability, but the project is always going to be a success because you anticipated everything and what to do in the event that became a reality.
Yeah, or at least 95%. Absolutely out there. There's very little in the world that's all that surprising. Most of our mistakes are the same mistakes again and again, which, by the way, is sad.
Exactly.
But, when you find yourself making the same mistake more than twice, there's a great chance that there's a learning opportunity staring you in the face. In fact, I'll give you a common one. Oh, yeah. So when I go into teams and I help them raise their level of team accountability, what I often find is that people are running different subroutines. They're running different mental operating systems, right? There's a couple of people who always say yes to everything, and they say yes very much too soon, and they're always overloaded with work, and they're always having to say, "Gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't get this done," but they're always saying yes, and it's okay. You've probably worked with one of these. And
yeah.
The mistake that they're making, it's a sweet mistake. It's very adorable. Is they want to make you happy, and they mistakenly think that they're making you happy by saying yes right away.
Right.
They're trying to purchase. I call it purchasing goodwill with a weak yes. Now they're wrong to do it, but you're wrong to listen to it, because the first or second time they do it, maybe that's okay, fine. But once you see they have that pattern, and you tolerate another weak yes from them,
then you're accountable.
Yeah, wrong for them to give it, but wrong for you to take it. Right? And so what you want to say to them is say, hey, I'll say Fred, because Fred is my go-to name, or I say Chris. Hey, Chris, I get that you want to say yes before I'm done asking my question, and I think it's really wonderful that you want to make me happy. I appreciate that very much. And at the same time, in the past, you've said yes to me very quickly, and then I felt a little disappointed. Remember we talked about last week when this happened. Can we slow it down a little bit? I want to make sure that you don't give me like a yes, you want to make me happy, but a yes, you're going to do the thing I'm asking, because those are actually two different statements.
Exactly.
Right? And so I'll take responsibility to slow it down if they don't, and I also teach them to do it. And I literally have an infographic that I teach from. It's got 30 questions that you ask in each of the 4 phases. It's got the 6 moves of negotiation, the 6 moves of acceptance. It's got the 7 psychological questions you ask yourself to stay out of trouble. And this purchasing goodwill is one of the sand traps that people end up landing in. Whether it's a client or your boss or somebody, either you're the one saying yes too quickly, or they're saying it to you too quickly. But either way, now that you've listened to this, you should be letting an alarm bell go off, and you say, well, hold on. So trick number 1 to appropriate accountability is slow down and don't say yes until you've got all the information you need for a powerful yes. And you might
correct.
But I need the business. But I want to make him happy. But it's like no.
No. You want to do a good job.
Yeah. Hey, along those lines, Thomas, if people are listening to this podcast, we deal with a lot of companies that are in all stages of development, and I'm sure that they need accountability information and want to learn more about what's going on here, especially with you. What's a good way for people to get in touch with you? Do you have a website or phone number, email, or what do you think?
Yeah, best way to go is go to my website at becomingabestboss.com, or just email me at tom@thomasbecox.com, and I'll repeat those again here in a minute. But becomingabestboss is .com is my website, and it's all about how do you be the best boss you can be? How can you be the best boss your folks have ever had?
Yeah, we'll link that to the show notes as well. But before we close this out, I have one more question for you, which is kind of like a theoretical thing. Like I said before, we deal with a lot of companies, and they're all on their online portals looking for crowdfunding and looking for investors, and they all put their documentation onto the portal, and they go to the SEC, and they have it all approved, et cetera. But in all this documentation, you rarely see a section that says accountability, right? Mm-hmm. Is that something that they're just missing, or is it something that it doesn't really matter until you're in business and you actually? What do you think?
Let me tell you what I would do from the investor side. Is I would ask, as I'm getting ready to start investing, actually, I'm going to start asking this: is what is your process for accountability? Right? What's your process for reaching and enforcing accountable agreements within staff? If I had the chance, I'd love to listen to either a board meeting or, better yet, the C-suite meeting, and listen to the extent to which people ask hard questions and admit mistakes and admit they don't know. And if you got senior leadership where it's not safe to admit mistakes or it's not safe to say you don't know something, then you know they've got low psychological safety and they're going to have weak accountability.
Right.
It's predictable.
Interesting.
And when you read their annual report of their perspectives, the more they talk about external forces being responsible for their results, the more worried you should be. And the more they talk about how, we didn't execute on this and we're going to do better over here, the more they blame themselves for their struggles when they have them, the more they have to put themselves in the driver's seat. And that's really what accountability is. It's about putting yourself in the driver's seat and taking 100% responsibility for both you and the other person, understanding each other so deeply that your accountable agreements become the truth, that what you say and what you do, there's no gap between them, and you're in complete integrity.
Yeah, that's true. And then
knowing your whole team.
Yeah. And I also want to thank you earlier in the podcast when you brought up one of my two pet peeves in business, which is, of course, the ASAP. I can't stand that. Please respond ASAP. Boy, does that bother me. What does possible mean? Come on. Give me a time and a date, and I'll do it, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, my other one, my other one is, you have to give 110%, which bothers me. Like 110%. Like, what, you want me to slow down? But that's again, we want to thank you for being on the podcast today. This is really informative, and it's something that every company needs to understand and really think through because it's very important. Vicki, do you have any closing comments or any questions you want to ask Thomas before we close this out?
Well, as a matter of fact, Lon, since we all know that Tom is the Chief Governance Officer, I would ask this one question, Tom. Despite what the business is, what the industry is, the size, despite all qualifiers, how do you think businesses today should approach the blockchain?
I think you need to be embracing it very rapidly, and you need to bear in mind that blockchains are about creating a single source of truth. And if you don't have a culture of honesty, of transparency, of psychological safety, then your people will resist that single source of truth because they're worried that someone's going to use the truth to beat them up. And so they'll say, well, it won't work here. They'll drag their feet. They won't tell you what their real worries are. But yeah, if in the process of embracing blockchain, you're going to have to create a learning organization. You're going to have to create an organization where the truth is not a threat. It's interesting and it's something to learn from. And I think ultimately that's going to be good for everybody. So yeah, embrace the blockchain knowing that it's going to require you to grow and improve as an organization.
Excellent.
Yeah, sounds
excellent. Good. Perfect answer. Couldn't have said it better myself, Tom.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, Thomas. Well, again, thank you so much for being a guest on today's show. I appreciate you taking the time out. Vicki, thanks for co-hosting the show today. It was great, really good information, like I said. And folks, you're listening to the Mappable USA podcast at MappableUSA.com. If you go there, you scroll down, you'll see all our syndication sources. Pick the one you like best, subscribe, and you'll never miss another one of our episodes. If you want to be a guest on the show, like Thomas was today, there's a guest tab there. Just fill that out. We'll see what you can do about getting you on the show. And if you like what you heard, send us an email, info@MappableUSA.com, or just comment on whatever page you're listening to this on right now. So thanks for your support. Thanks for listening. We'll be at you next week with another Mappable USA podcast. Have a great week, everyone.